All right, I want to welcome you to our Grief to Life coaching. We call it Growing Through Grief. And I want to set the ground rules first as we get started with this. One thing I'm going to say is that participation is going to be very beneficial. We don't obviously force anyone to participate, but participation is going to, the more you participate, the more you invest in something, the greater return you're going to get from it. So we ask you to participate and invest by turning on your cameras. Also by answering questions or even asking questions as well too. But we have time later on where you can ask questions. But again, the more that you participate in something, the greater you're going to get a return out of it. And I'm here today to help you. And we want to be respectful of everyone that is speaking. If you are offended in any way, shape, or form by mention of the Bible or of God, then I'm going to invite you that you can just turn off now, because this is where we get really our information from, and really how we can help you to grow through grief is going to be sharing some stories from the Bible and of God. So if that is something that strikes a nerve with you, then you don't have to watch any further. Just wanted to set that out there as well. In addition, I'm going to share as much information I can with you today. I'm looking to help as many people as possible. However, at the end of this, I am going to let you know of potential of working with us in coaching, Grief to Life coaching. So it's going to be an offer. It's not for everyone. We have different programs we have available. However, I just want to give you a heads up from now. Certainly, you'll be able to get some information from this session, but if you desire to work further with us, there will be an offer at the end. But for right now, I want to continue on. Those are ground rules that we have, nothing too much. But for those who don't know, my name is Samuel Stewart, and I'm going to give you a little bit about my history and why I'm here to speak to you today. So my initial experience with grief was back in 2000 when my mom made her transition. And as a result of her transition, it's a little bit longer story, but I'm not going to go into all of that right now. But as a result of her transition, it got me down the path of starting a business where we actually create memorial products for people. So from funeral programs and prayer cards and all kinds of personalized things like that. And that's what I've been doing for over 24 years at this point. And we service a lot of families, and we're able to help them during the time of the funeral service. So that was one significant death that, even though it was something that was tragic, it was a point of opportunity, I'll say, that we've been able to help. And we call it Honor You Memorial Parks, help to honor the lives of many other people that have gone on, and also honor the families and to help to assist them during the time of the funeral services. However, at this stage now, why I'm here today is because we are moving not just from helping people in the immediate sense of the funeral services, but also to be able to help people after the funeral is over and those that suffer through grief. So we're offering Grief to Life coaching. All right. So it's not grief coaching. It's not just life coaching, but really being able to use that grief to point us and help us to get towards a better life. So in addition to my mom passing, when she passed, I went through, all the different emotions that we go through when we grieve, and different people go through different things. Obviously, that's how grief actually works. That is very unique. But I felt unsure. This was the first time I was faced with the death of a loved one. So I was unsure, didn't know what to do. It was almost like a surreal moment. And then to be rushed into the planning and what had to take place with the funeral arrangements and all the details of that. Then to even, I would say, anger. I went through a period of anger as well too. Anger for the situation I was in, anger at my mom, and also even some anxiety as I've gone through as well. Just was in a unsure point of my life. However, God used that to be able to help many other people that go through that point of their life, where it seems like it's the most devastating time of life. But then we were able to use that to be able to minister and to help many other people. So that was my first experience with the death of a loved one. And then since then, we've obviously worked with thousands of other families, seen many different scenarios, many different situations, have talked with families, have worked with them, helped them through some trying times in their lives. And I was faced with death again when my father transitioned in 2017. Now, this was a different scenario for my mom because now I'm in this industry, and you think that when someone is in industry that they don't go through it the same as someone else. However, that's not the case. Even being used to, and I'll say it like this, used to death, we are still faced with the reality of it when someone that we love is gone. So when he transitioned, it was another set of emotions that went through. His passing was even a little different because he was at home with us at the time of his passing. So even the period of taking care of him and being able to be there for him and take him to that point actually brought another level of grief and what I had to go through during that time as well too. And then that wasn't the only other one that personally touched me. Then I would say a dear friend of mine who just transitioned last year, my friend Chris, he made his transition, and his was another one as well too that put me into. It was almost like a surprise, I would say. I didn't quite know up front what I was feeling, and it didn't manifest itself until later on, actually months later, and I saw some things happening, and I was able to figure out and realize that this was actually a result of grief that I was dealing with. But his transition was another point that I had to like reevaluate some things and really make some major life moves and some transitions, but actually points me onto a greater course in life and actually set me up even to go further into ministry. My dad's passing kind of gave me the framework for what I was going to be doing. But then when Chris's transition, it kind of like gave me that real oomph to push ahead. And we're going to talk about a little bit as we go further in this webinar as well too, of how grief can have such a profound effect on our life. And that's why we say growing through grief. And I'm going to say this probably several times, that we don't want to just go through grief. And that's what a lot of times people do, is they just go through grief alone when we can grow through grief, and we can do that together. So that's my history. That's my experience from my own personal bouts or instances of grief to helping the many families we work with. Then also working with other funeral professionals, people in the industry, interviewing them, talking to them, speaking to them. I picked up a wealth of information and knowledge, and also from Bible study and even being able to officiate funeral services and doing things like that, even in my ministerial capacity. I just learned a lot of different things that I want to be able to share with you to help you during this time. This is really what we're here for. So a couple of points I want to say, and then we'll kind of just wrap it up for today. But one is that a lot of times when we get into grief or we are in a period of grief, we almost can think that it has no end, that it's just going to be forever. It's going to just be on and on and on and on. And we don't see a way out. And a lot of times we're in something, we just don't see the way out of it. And I'll give an example of something that happened to me years ago. And this actually was right around the time of my mom's passing, that we had a house that we had purchased. And I was young, I was married, and we had some small children. We had purchased a house, and then we started to run into financial trouble, some financial situations. And the house became such a burden for me. And it was like, this was the problem that we had, that every month I had to come up with this margin, or I had to pay this thing. And it was, the house looked like it was a problem. And I remember at one point screaming in my basement and like mad at God and yelling and saying, this is not right. This is not fair. This is not what I expected growing up in church and knowing about having a relationship with the Lord. And then now to see myself struggling like that. So this house, which was the pain point, I'll say, I looked at it and saw it as this was the problem. So long story short, lo and behold, what we ended up doing was we actually were able to sell that house. And what selling that house did for me actually showed me that the house, the money we made from the house, it was profitable. So we were able to use that money from that house and actually purchase another house completely with no mortgage, no debt or anything like that, and get out of the situation that we was in where we was just like drowning in debt. So it taught me a very important lesson that sometimes what we think is the problem has within it the solution. All right, I'm gonna say it again. Sometimes what we think is the problem has right within it the solution. The house I thought was a problem, but once we were able to sell the house actually gave us a solution for what we were looking for. And I'll say the same thing even with grief, that we think that the grief is a problem. However, within that grief, it can still provide a solution for some other things that we go through in life. And grief, again, most certainly does have an end because, just like with the house, there was an end to my pain. There was an end to the burden or the weight of that home. And it was a wonderful end because it brought us into such a peaceful time of life, and we had no mortgage, we was able to just live. And the same thing with grief, that grief certainly has an end. The Bible tells several scriptures. I don't know. Do you know any of those scriptures? One is that weeping may endure for the night, but it doesn't end there. It also says that joy comes in the morning. So while weeping does occur, it doesn't last forever. Joy will come afterwards. So even as I talk to you and I share this with you, this is a promise that not Samuel is making to you, but that the word of God is telling us, is sharing with us, and just reminding us that there's going to be a time for weeping, there's going to be a time for grieving, but then it certainly does have an end. One of my favorite stories from the Bible that deals with grief is the story in John chapter 11, which is talking about Lazarus, where Lazarus dies. And he was a friend of Jesus, and Martha and Mary, his sisters as well, and he died. And then it shows us at one point that Jesus wept. But guess what? There was more to the story after that. He didn't just end at that point of grief. And he actually went about and he was able to do something during that time. And some really great lessons that we can learn from this as well. So grief most certainly has an end. All right. So your grief that you're going through has an end to it as well, too. All right. So there was another instance, I have it on my side on here as well, too, where, there's some instances in the Bible about grief. But there's another instance I've written down before, was that David was grieving. But then there was a point where he was able to get himself back together, and that grief ended, that grief stopped. So grief most certainly does have an end. That's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to say is in regards to understanding grief. And many times when we go through grief, and you may feel this for yourself, and I felt this before, that nobody quite understands the grief that I go through. Nobody understands my situation. And you may be talking to people, or you have people around you that aren't grieving, or maybe even people who may be affected by the loss like how you were affected. But I'm gonna agree with that statement that no one can really understand your grief, because grief is so unique. Everyone grieves differently because we're all made differently. Our personality, our characteristics, our circumstances, our past, what we're going through in the present. This all affects how we're going to grieve. So everyone's grief is unique. And no one is going to perfectly understand your grief, because not only are you unique, but then guess what? Your loved one, the person that has transitioned, the person that has died, the person that is no longer here, their life was unique. So now you have your uniqueness, and their uniqueness is going to definitely mean there's going to be a unique grief. And then the relationship that you had. So even though a person may die, different people have different relationships with them. So guess what? Their grief is going to be unique as well, too. So I completely agree with that statement that nobody understands your grief. And for that reason, exactly for that reason, I'm saying as we are here to grow through grief, I'm not here to help you to understand your grief. You're going to process it. You're going to go through, and this, things. We have some writings that can show you like the stages of grief. But even as you go through this coaching, it's not necessary for us to understand your grief. However, your grief can be used, and one thing I've learned that some of the most traumatic and painful experiences in life are actually the greatest opportunities for transformation in our lives. I'm going to repeat, some of the most traumatic and painful points of life is also some of the opportunity for the greatest transformation in our lives. And I would say that I don't know of anything that can be more devastating to someone than when there's a loss that has occurred. All right, when there's a loss that has occurred, that can be one of the most devastating things that happens to an individual. So, with that being said, we can actually use this to grow and to transform our lives. So, again, we're not necessarily going to understand grief because we're going to go through it individually. We're going to go through it uniquely. We're all going to be experiencing it differently. However, as we experience our grief, as we, I'm going to just ask you to mute real quick. I'm going to mute you right there. We're not going to understand our grief, but our grief can be used to really transform our life and to live the life that God has for us to live. So I'm going to repeat something I said earlier, that as we go through this, we're definitely referencing the Bible. We're definitely referencing God. We're referencing even things I've learned from Bible, from my experience in this whole industry. And I want to make sure that if you have any challenges with that, then you don't have to continue to watch. You have freedom to turn it off. But I'm going to be sharing with you things from the Bible that I've learned that can help us to grow through grief. So there's another point that I was sharing with you in regards to the understanding of grief, and there's a term called resiliency. And we can use it as an example, like a ball. You can drop a ball and you can bounce it, and it can usually come right back to where you dropped it at. However, sometimes when you are more resilient and you have a ball that has this capacity within itself, then you can drop the ball and it can actually bounce back higher than when you started, when you dropped the ball initially. So why this is important is because as we even go through grief, yes, it's something that's traumatic. Yes, it's something that is hard, that we can actually, through resiliency and developing resilience, we actually can use this to bounce back in life better than we were before, to bounce back higher than we were before. It's almost similar to exercise, which I love to exercise as well too. And if you know anything about exercise, when you exercise, if you're lifting some heavy weights or if you're just doing some exercise, oftentimes when you first exercise, you're going to feel some pain. Why? Because you're tearing some muscle. You're causing trauma to your muscles. But guess what? Because of that trauma, it grows back and you get stronger. And this is the same way that we can go through grief, where, yes, this devastating thing happened, but we can use it to come back stronger and to soar higher and to be better. So this is how I want to share with you and go through these even teachings of growing through grief, that we can use it to come back and to be better in our lives. Remember, again, from this, it's not about the understanding, because everyone's grief is going to be unique, but it's how can we use our grief to be better, okay? So grief is not to be understood, but to be used. Now, the third point I want to bring up with this is even the concept of what this is, and I said it's Bible-based, it's Christian-based, We're going to talk about God. We're going to talk about the Bible. And this is a Christian grief to life coaching program. Now, this is not therapy and it's not counseling, so I don't use those terms. And even just so you have an understanding of the difference of those, is therapy and counseling is going to look more at what happened. What happened here in this situation. Let's see if we can unpack it. Let's see if we can process it. Let's see if we can work through what happened. Whereas the coaching is we are aware of what happened, but we're going to use even the pain and trauma, like I was saying before, of this to catapult us and to set our destination even higher. Use it almost like fuel. Excuse me. Use it almost like fuel for our lives so that we can live better and be, as the word says, be more than a conqueror. All right. So we're not denying that certain things happen. However, we're using that as fuel to go ahead in life. Something I've learned even recently, I'll share with you. If I could draw it on here, I would make it a little bit easier. But usually we think of time as just straight linear. You have the past, you have the present, and then you have the future. Okay? So this is going to explain to you how the Christian grief to life coaching is going to work as well too. You have the past, you have the present, and then you have the future. You think of in a linear state that's just okay, you're just going from one to the next to the next to the next. And what happens with that is we allow our past to really frame our present. So what's happened in the past now becomes how we think in our present, the actions that we take in our present, what we do in our present, and then see our present, what our present does, whatever we're doing today is going to then impact our future. It's going to dictate what our future is going to be. So our past is really controlling our present, and then our present is controlling our future. And that's a more linear understanding or thinking of how time is. Where in how we should, or how Christian this Christian grief to life coaching is, where we're going to even we still have past, present, future, but we're using the future of what we want to accomplish, the goals that we have, to now determine. It's actually working backwards. The future is setting us up to what we're going to be doing in our present. And then our present actually is going to then even reframe some of the things that happened in our past to then start to use it, like we said, as fuel, start to use it as the catalyst for the great things that we're going to accomplish. So they say that trauma, when we go through traumatic situations, it's like a crossroad. We have a decision to make. We can either develop from it, or we can allow it to diminish us. And we want to teach you, even through this Christian grief to life coaching, how to develop through this process. This whole concept of the coaching, where we're looking at the future and allowing and having that to really help to shape our present and what we're doing. It's a concept that I've spoken about before and I've even written about before, called starting from the end. And it's so powerful, and it works in so many different ways, that we start from the end and allow that to really create what we're doing today. And I used it in the example of like taking a trip. If you want to go to Florida, which is a place that we've frequently visited, years and years, we visited Florida. We start from the end. We start, considering Florida, considering where we want to go, and then we actually work our way backwards on this trip to get to where we want to be. And this is actually how the GPS system works, that we use in our cars, that we use on our phones, and so forth. You put in the destination that you want to go to, and then what it does is it maps all the points to get you to where you want to go from where you are. So it's the same concept that we're doing. We're starting from the end. We're looking at the end goal of what we want, and then we're going to show you how you can map your way back to the present so that you have a clear path. See, what happens a lot of times in grief is that people get stuck, and they feel stuck, and they just don't know where to go and how to move. I've heard so many stories about that. Even a pastor that I was listening to was talking about his grief, and it was years ago that his I think his mom had passed, and comes to find out, many years later, that he realized that he had been stuck in grief for such a long time, and he realized it afterwards. But this is what happens to so many people, that they get stuck in grief. They just allow their life to just be put on pause, be put on hold. And I'll say, that's almost like a double devastation. A double, one death or one loss is enough. But now, when a person, a loved one we has died, and then we also die as well too, and we stop living, then it's like a double loss. And this is not how it's supposed to be. This is not how God intended for us to be. Yes, we're supposed to go through grief. Yes, we're supposed to grieve the loss of a loved one, grieve the separation, go through the process of grieving. However, we cannot remain stuck in grief. And this is why we need to have like a Christian grief to life coaching program, so that we don't get stuck in grief, but we can grow through grief. Remember, you don't have to go through grief alone, but we can be growing through grief together. So again, this is the point of the whole Christian um, grief to life coaching versus therapy or counseling, because the therapy and counseling is going to do something that's going to be looking, and for some that is perfectly what is needed and what is necessary. And I'm not disputing, or I'm not even saying anything about that's not even necessary. For some, that is what's necessary. You have to unpack, you have to process what has happened in the past. However, for this program, what we want to do is actually use it again as the catalyst to live the life that God has for us to live, and to live even better. All right. So some of the things, we have an ebook in Finding Joy and Happiness After the Death of a Loved One. And some of the things that we can do once we're faced with grief. And I'm going to make it simple in this regards. God has given each of us a gift of the senses. We call them the five senses. Okay. We have senses, and do we know what those senses are? All right. One is sight. Okay. One is our ability to hear. Then we have our nose, where we can smell. Another one is we can taste with our mouth. And then we can actually touch. All right, we can touch. So these five senses actually allows us to change how our brain is functioning. It allows us to change how we're thinking. It allows us to change even things going on physiological in our bodies through these five senses. So grief is no exception. Through the five senses, we can actually do things to impact and to help us, during the time of our grief. So this is something I'm going to share with you really quickly, just considering the senses and what can be done through each of these senses to have a great impact and to help us during time of our grief. There's a scripture in the Bible that there's a great medicine that is available. It's not the new latest vaccine or the latest drug or even the herbal medicine. There's a great medicine in the Bible. I don't know if you picked it up yet, what I'm talking about. It says that laughter does good like a medicine. All right. Laughter does good like a medicine. Usually you're laughing over something you might have heard or something you might have seen. Actually, remember, these are the senses that we're talking about. And you're laughing. But being able to laugh and enjoy even life still starts to give you some medicine, not just for grief, but so many different things. But we're talking here about grief. So definitely when we're grieving, to have moments where we can, enjoy something that will put a smile on our face, that will bring laughter, that will bring some kind of joy. That starts to help to shift our mood out of the depression, out of the state of even anxiety, all the different things we can go through that we don't want to continue on in our grief. But laughter can actually help us during that time. Okay, so laughter does good like a medicine. Secondly, I'm going to say from that same book of John chapter 11, where it talks about Lazarus, there's something that was in there that was spoken about where Mary and Martha, their brother Lazarus had died. And what happened? All the people came together in the community. And I'm going to put this with touch that they were in the vicinity. They came around, they huddled around them to be amongst them. And this is something that is, I don't know if people realize the great value of it as much as they should. I think once they're in community, they feel good, but they don't realize how essential community is for all of us, just to be in the vicinity. Because remember, when there's a loss, when there's a death, when there's a transition, there was a separation that took place. There was a separation that occurred. And that is part of why it's so traumatic, because the Bible tells us that we weren't meant to be alone. We're supposed to be amongst other people. So now when this loved one that we have is no longer there, someone, or even just a person that we're used to having around in our lives are no longer there, there's going to be heartache, there's going to be grief, there's going to be sorrow, there's going to be all those emotions because of the separation. It's just not, we're supposed to be in community. So that gives us a hint as to something that we can do to counter that feeling, and that's to surround ourselves with other people, to have other people around us, have our family around us, our friends, our loved ones, even the community that we're having here and growing through grief and having the community online. Just having people around you helps you through your grief. And that's, like I said, the point of touch, whether it's a physical touch you can touch, or just even touch while you're touching on your keyboard and maybe typing and in the community and talking to people through cameras and so forth. This is still the community coming together. There's nothing like being in the physical presence of people, but sometimes that's just not available. So also have a community that you can have online that you can be part of as well too. And that's what we're here for, to be part of that community. So we talked about the senses. We talked also about, I'm going to go through a couple of them, hearing. When we talked about laughter with hearing, but also hearing the right things. And I'm going to say this, saying the things, because as I'm speaking, I'm actually hearing myself as well too. So the internal dialogue that we're having, and also, I would say audible dialogue as well too, because I'm very much big on affirmations and saying affirmations, doing things like this, speaking positively out loud so that you actually hear yourself. There's so many studies that shows how powerful this is for transformation, how much of an impact this has on us mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, uplifting our spirits, speaking and out loud, saying positive affirmations. Some of the affirmations I say is like, I am peace, I am joy, I am happy, things like that. And all the positive things that you want to have, even if you don't feel it at the time, it helps you to get that way. You can speak things into existence. You most certainly can speak things into existence. So audibly saying things that you can hear. Okay, so that was that. There could be something we said with the mouth you can taste. Having a taste. These things, well, actually, let me go, well, we'll stick with taste, but the hearing one, we also listening to music. That's another thing that is so good. All right, listening to music, some relaxing music, some music that is upbeat, that's uplifting. It could be music that your loved one used to like to listen to, that you used to like to listen to together, maybe dance together, or what have you. Some songs that just bring back some really fond memories. But music is another one that we can do with our ears. Taste is another thing as well too. Some certain taste. We learned something not too long ago about how even certain um, flavors brings about emotions within us. So knowing the right things that you can taste and how that can help you during time of grief. And then your smell, your nostrils as well too. I'm into aromatherapy and things like that, and how the different essential oils and things can actually help to shift and to change your mood. So remember, the senses that God has given to us, the five senses that well, there's more than five, but the senses, the main ones we talk about usually, your sight, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, and what you're able to touch, be in community. All these things can help you dramatically, drastically during the time of your grief. All right. So there's one more part that I want to bring up, and then if there's any questions, I'm going to take any questions. Just as far as the whole process of how this the grief to life coaching works. I call it the 5 Ds. All right. There's 5 Ds. The first D, and this is for the transformation or to get towards your destiny, which is the fifth D. The first D is we help you to determine. Then second D is to decide. The third D is to develop. And then the fourth D is to deliver. And then the fifth D, I told you before, is to get to your destiny. And this is how we do in the Grief Life coaching, where we're looking at the future. We have the destiny that's available for us. This is what we want to accomplish. This is what we want to achieve. This is what we want our life to be like. Even in spite of this traumatic thing that happened to us, we're keeping our attention focused on the future of what we want our life to look like. And then the first thing we're going to do is help you to determine. And there's so many different ways to determine. Imagine what it's going to be like once you have you've determined where you are. Sometimes we go through and we never stop to see where we are. It's so very vital, so very crucial. If you've ever been in the mall and you look to say, I want to go to Lord and Taylor's, the store, and you go into the mall, and what do? You look on the map that's there, and you say, okay, Lord and Taylor is in section H on the second floor, and that's great. But without one important part of that map, you would never, or it would be almost impossible to find Lord and Taylor, or it would be just so difficult to find it. There's usually X or a circle or some kind of indication to let you know where you are. So now Lord and Taylor can be in section H on the second row. If you see that you're in section A on the first floor, you have to go up a floor, get from section A to section H, and you'll be at Lord and Taylor. Without knowing where you are, you wouldn't know how to get to where you're going. So the first step in this is to determine. And just imagine knowing where you are, and just having that level of honesty with yourself to realize, and it's not just you being honest with yourself, there's actually tools and techniques we can show you to determine where you are. Even grief has so many different stages and different levels, from denial to anger to blame. So just to know where you are even in your grieving process and where you are in your life, it's just enlightening. That was one of the first things, actually, when God called out to Adam and Eve in the garden. He said, where art thou? He asked them, where are you? Identify, and it wasn't that God didn't know. It was for them to know where they were. They had to determine. So this is what we help you do. So determine. Now, the second part, remember those 5 Ds. First one is determine. Second is to decide. And this is, to me, I think it's the fun part. To decide. It's almost like you have a blank slate and you can decide whatever it is you want to be. Almost like a child, just with a world of wonder in front of them. They can decide, and we're going to help you to decide what it is that you actually want to accomplish, what it is that you want to achieve. And it's like I said, it's like a coloring book with all the colors that you can draw, and just a blank page. You can draw whatever it is that you want to draw. And we're going to even show you some techniques of even obituaries, and how this can actually be a fantastic tool to help you to decide and to see and place no limits on yourself. We want the most extravagant decide that we can fathom, that you can think of, because remember, we're starting from the end. So we want this to be such a high point, and then we're going to show you how you can accomplish it. So The first was determine, second one was to decide, third was to develop. All right. So now we have this endpoint. We know where we are in the present. Okay. So we have the future. We know we're in the present. Now we're going to develop. What are your steps to take to get to that destiny, to get to that place that you decided, the destiny. Okay. And develop a nice strategy that is something that is manageable, that can be done, little by little. Because that's one thing I found that, we don't, when you take two big chunks, it gets overwhelming. And if we could just do a little and manageable steps that we can take, and this is how we can help you to get to this endpoint, even through grief, that you can get to this endpoint of this fantastic life. So we're going to help you to determine, we're going to help you to decide, we're going to help you to develop that plan, the strategy. And then the next one is to deliver. Now that we have all these nice little goals set up towards our destiny, then we will even manage how we deliver. How do we accomplish each one of these different things? It's not enough just to have, the ideas. Okay, we have a plan. If we have a plan and we don't do stuff to work the plan, then it's just a plan. A plan on paper is just a plan on paper until we actually go through the process. And that's what we call deliverables actually in business, but we're going to say in life, just delivering deliverables in life, delivering on all these little goals, working towards where we want to be and that destiny, and that 50 we have as a destiny. So this is the part of the Grief to Life coaching program that we're going to invite you to look at and consider and see if it's something that's going to be right fit for you, because not for everybody. I'll say that confidently that it's not for everyone. However, it can be a great catalyst and transform your life to get to where you want it to be, even after going through grief. All right. So we have several coaching programs. We have, my wife and I, we do a marriage coaching program. We're also doing some family coaching. And this one here now is going to be the Grief to Life Coach Program. Now we have high programs, $30,000, but we're not going to start with those kind of coaching programs. We want to actually offer this coaching program to you. We're doing it for people that are, that we've actually worked with in some capacity. This is one of the first times that we're opening it up to outside people, but we still want to make it that it's going to be manageable and workable for you. So I just want to leave with what we just taught. I'm not going to share anything else with you more. If you're interested, though, I'm going to invite you to shoot me an email. I'm going to give you my personal email. Just shoot me an email if you're interested, and then we can talk further about the Grief to Life coaching program. And it's not the high one that I could say before, because that's not for you right now. But you can shoot me an email. My email address is my full name, Samuel Stewart, SamuelStewart at hotmail.com. Okay. Again, it's Samuel Stewart at hotmail.com. So remember, just a recap of what we talked about today, my experience with grief and just some of the groundwork, that this is definitely a biblically based program. So make sure you're comfortable hearing about God and hearing about the Bible. If you have any challenges with that, then this is not the program for you. And that's it right there. So you don't have to go any further with it. Secondly, grief certainly does have an end. There is an end to grief. It doesn't have to last forever. Okay. It's not about understanding. We're not looking to understand, because everyone's grief is unique. I definitely agree with that statement. Everyone's grief is unique. So grief is not, for me, grief is not to be understood, but to be used. We want to use that as a catalyst point for us to really soar through life. And then also just the difference between the coaching aspect versus therapy or even counseling, where we're not looking at the past and the trauma that happened in the past. We're not denying that it's happened. However, we're allowing our future to shape our present. Okay. And then we talked about the five senses And, even just recognizing that God's given us these senses, and by using those senses and allowing those senses to bring input, because they bring input into our brain, using those senses and different opportunities that can help us during the time of our grieving, or during any traumatic or devastating times of our life, using those senses, whether it's our hearing, whether it's our taste, and even our talking so we can hear, our smell, our eyesight, okay? Touch, being in community as well. And then just setting up for even those 5 Ds. Remember, the first one is to determine, see where you are. In order to get to where you want to go, you have to start by knowing where you are. Determine. Then decide. Decide where it is that even an extravagant, almost an impossible goal that you might want to say that you have for yourself. Decide. Then to develop nice little plan to get from where we are right now towards that goal that we want to accomplish. Then to deliver, we say deliverables, and each working, almost like measuring and checking those things so that way we can get towards our desired goal. And then last D is that we're going to be at our destiny. And that's what the Lord has for you and I. Destiny, he doesn't want us to stay. It's actually the Bible says, blessed are those that mourn, for they shall be comforted. All right. So it's not for us to stay in the mourning process. It says that we're going to be blessed because we're going to be comforted. All right. Weeping may endure for a night. Remember, joy does come in the morning. So I'm going to end with this, that you do not have to go through grief alone, when we can be growing through grief together. Remember to email me if you're interested in hearing about the offer. Hopefully this has been a blessing to you. Email me at my personal email address, samuelstewart@hotmail.com, SamuelStewart @hotmail.com.